Please put your hands together. Before she comes up, I'd like to introduce her to you in greater detail. Tola Odeyemi is a transformative leader, accomplished engineer, and public policy strategist whose career spans more than 2 decades of impact across government, technology, and regulatory sectors. She is the first female Postmaster General and CEO of the Nigerian Postal Service, NIPOST, appointed in October 2023. Tola's intellectual foundation is anchored in engineering and public policy. She earned her bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Morgan State University in the USA, a master's in systems engineering from George Washington University, and completed an executive certification in public policy at Harvard University. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as we welcome to the platform Africa, Tola Odeyemi.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Are my slides up? How do I put my slides on? Where is the slide? Okay. All right. So once again, good morning, everyone. So I'm here to share my journey, right? I call it the long walk to nation building. A while ago, I made a decision, and that decision I made basically telling myself that regardless of what happened, I was either going to be in government or government-facing. And so I want to share this story with you. I'll first like to thank the convener of the Platform Africa, Pastor Poju, and the Covenant Nation for this opportunity as speaking at the maiden edition of Platform Africa. Okay. So I call this the debate that drew me in. So how did I get to this decision that regardless of what happened, I was going to be public sector facing or in public sector? There are 2 gentlemen that I don't know if anybody here knows them. One is Mr. Jeffrey Saxs, who at the time was a director of the Earth Institute at Columbia University, and the second being William Easterly, who is a professor of economics at NYU. So these 2 gentlemen basically had a feud. I mean, it was the, how do I put it? It was the international development version of the what's his name? Kendrick Lamar and Drake feud, right? So it was between these 2 people. And what was the bone of contention between them? Jeffrey Saxs, who at the time was the special advisor to the UN Secretary General, and he was on Millennium Development Goals, had written a book called The End of Poverty, in which he outlined a grand plan for bringing countries out of the poverty trap, particularly countries in sub-Saharan Africa and South America. William Easterly, on the other hand, had written 2 books, the first one called The White Man's Burden, and the second one being The Tyranny of Experts, in which he basically said that any grand plan that was centralized, this sort of IMF, World Bank, United Nations interventions, were doomed to fail. And they both went back and forth, both on and offline, and I believe one of them even had to deactivate his Twitter profile because of that. Now, I learned 2 things from these conversations. One, the resource mobilization for the escape of Africa from the poverty trap was being discussed above Africa without anybody else. It was between Jeffrey Saxs and William Easterly in New York. The second being that I look at Jeffrey Saxs as somebody who was an idealist. He planned based on a perfect world, and William Easterly planned based on the fact that the world isn't perfect and people aren't perfect, the institutions aren't perfect. So that opened my eyes that in public service, There are big dreams that people like Jeffrey Sachs have must meet with reality, and which was what someone like William Easterly was saying. So this public service to me is where idealism meets reality. So you come into public service with big plans and everything, but your idealism, the plans that you have, the plans that I had when I joined public service, has to meet with the reality of what I call bureaucracy, politics, and legacy systems. So no matter what you think you want to do, there are these three things that you have to deal with. In fact, when I was trying to put my words together, my team and I from NIPOS, we were laughing because we were thinking about a lot of the things that we had said that we were going to do when we entered NIPOS, our plans. Week 1 to week 6, you do this. Week 6 to week 10, you do this, blah, 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 blah. And then, we just had a laugh like how naive that we were. And really, part of the reason why public sector work demands a lot of patience and resilience, to be honest, is because the challenges, particularly on the African continent, that we're facing is what my Honorable Minister, Dr. Bosun Tijani, I think in years back, he had spoken at the platform, and he called them wicked problems, is what we're dealing with in public sector, particularly on the continent. And what are wicked problems? They are problems that as you are trying to fix them are getting worse. So for example, poverty, out of school children. Right now, the entire Federal Executive Council of Nigeria, and probably of every country on the African continent, is trying to fix these sort of social development problems. But as we're trying to fix them, they're actually getting worse in real time. There are tens of millions of out-of-school children that we're trying to get into the school system. But at the same time, Nigeria is adding 5 million more babies year on year. And really, reality is that a percentage of those children are still going to become out-of-school children. So it's getting worse. I mean, the problems are compounding. The problems are neither linear nor simple. As you fix one, there's another 3 dimensions emerge, and therefore there's no silver bullet. And that's why the only thing that works in public sector is continuous and adaptive problem solving. And this I learned very quickly at NIPOS, that even when you have things that are straightforward, things that are logical that need to be done, once they collide with layers of history, layers of interest, and evolving realities, that is where I call it, when I say that idealism meets reality. So what was my own reality check in NIPOS? I talk about bureaucracy, legacy systems, and stakeholder complexity. I stepped there, I realized that having the right answers, the logical answers, is not good enough in public sector, and it's the honest truth. Because in public sector, even if you have the right answers, you have to learn to align coalitions. You have diverse stakeholders. Your stakeholders are as diverse as Nigeria itself. And in fact, sometimes, something I call strategic patience in public sector, you have to move slower initially so that you can move faster in the future. Right? Not everything is a speeding train. That slow movement of who are the people that I need to speak with, who are the people that I need to align with across your legislature. You have at the state level, you have your House of Assembly. At federal level, you have your House of Representatives, you have your Senate, you have different ministries, departments, you have the Office of the President, Office of the Vice President. I mean, and the plethora. You have governors, you have local governments. And I'll give you an example. There's a project that I want to leave behind at NIPOS as a legacy project for myself. Very straightforward. It's strategic to NIPOS. It's very strategic to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So I entered NIPOS and said, okay, so what's going on? And anybody who's in public sector here, this story will be very familiar to you. So we got into a meeting to discuss the problem, like the way forward. And you're in trouble when somebody pulls out a history lesson. And the history lesson started that in 1994. When this happened, a committee was set up. The moment you hear those words, trust me, your project goes from this way into 8 ways. A committee was set up with 18 agencies. And a report on the policy was brought out. Then they bring out like this 500-page report, bam. That's number 1. And from that policy, this regulation was set up, bam, number 2. So what you then realize a lot of times in public sector is that you don't have as much power as you think you have. Everybody calls me Postmaster General, PMG, but honestly, I probably have, as it is, I already have 10,000 bosses because NIPOS is 10,000 people strong. I might be CEO, but I have multiple layers of ogas, so to speak. So in public sector, one thing that you quickly realize is that, yes, we all go in there with dreams of making change, which is still valid, but that you are met with the reality of things like bureaucracy, politics, slow decision-making. And the slow decision-making isn't because anybody is trying to upend you, but it is because institutions must be slow and deliberate, right? And if navigating this reality, navigating this complexity was a shock, I think for me, the next thing that shocked me more, was criticism, which is a part of the journey in public sector. So it so happened that before I joined NIPOS, Twitter for me was a very fact-gathering tool. And so I had even switched off, if I didn't follow you and you mentioned me in something, in a tweet, I won't see it. It would not even notify me. And I had a rough Twitter. My first couple of months was quite rough on Twitter, right? And one thing public sector teaches you have to have resilience, how to learn without any cynicism. And the only reason that people will criticize you is because you are relevant. If, as people talk about NIPOS, I find hundreds of people who are still interested, whether they are criticizing me, whether they are praising me, whether they are giving ideas, all this just shows that there's relevance, and it's something that you must get used to because your citizens, the citizens of Nigeria or wherever you are from, wherever you are working, are your primary constituents. And the thing is, another two things that I learned is that optics matter and symbolism matters. In that if people do not see the change, if they cannot identify with the change that you are making, meaning that sometimes if they cannot even see what you are doing. For private sector, I'm used to barreling my head down and just working. Who cares about posting what I did? But if there's no legitimacy if people cannot see themselves in the change that you're making and if they don't see the change that you're making. So through all of this, I gathered some lessons and truths about what it really takes to cross from private sector to public sector and thrive in it. So one of the things is, in public sector is, purpose over profit, which is something that I'm sure it's quite obvious that in private sector, it's profit, right? You have shareholders, you have people who have invested in the business or whatever. But in public sector, it is impact. In public sector, what you're trying to do is grow institutions. For everybody from Lagos to Maiduguri. The Nigerian Postal Service is very unique in that we have representation in every single local government of Nigeria. We have about 1,500 locations, meaning that at the very least, you could have about 2 locations in every local government, meaning that my purpose is to ensure that there's service in every local government of Nigeria. And my big dream for NIPOS is to use both the postal service and the postal network, because I separate the two, the service and the network, as a platform for inclusive economic growth in Nigeria. And so for me, purpose, not profit, is what fuels me. In private sector, people measure results measure themselves by results, which is adequate. But in government, you need to be able to measure impact and legacy. The return on investment for a lot of civil servants is impact stories. Government likes to see that things are impacting positively on the citizens. And so, it's not like looking for success isn't bad. And so therefore, it's not like you have to leave all your private sector sort of mindset behind. You need to, but what you need to do with that is redirect it. And how did I redirect it? I have a very wide range of my coverage. I worked for Central Bank of Nigeria, I worked for Lagos State, I worked for Uber, I worked for Binance. And one of the very good things, of course, I work, my agency is under the Ministry of Communications, Innovation, and Digital Economy. So for me, the first thing was about digital transformation in NIPOS. And so I used the toolkits that I came from technology policy, and I used this toolkit to build a bridge at NIPOS. So we're doing a lot of interesting work. We're working with InterSwitch to digitize our counter operations. We're working with Sendbox, Paystack. We're building the new Nigerian digital postcode. We are reviving our financial services system. NIPOS has both a super agency license as well as an international money transfer operator license. So we're using the international financial services corridor of the Universal Postal Union to ensure that we're able to do remittances through the postal network and things like that. But you deliver these things, and a lot of times what then happens is that you have to deliver them in spite of budgetary constraints. And at NIPOS, budgetary constraints is something that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. So how are you able to innovate within constraints? So resource constraints, because it's something I met in NIPOS. I remember when I don't even know whether I should say this, but when I got to NIPOS the first day, I'd done all my, gotten all the directors to do their presentations, and I think I then asked the DFA, okay, so based on the work we want to do, please let me know what is the balance, what is the budget, and I was then told very nicely that NIPOS does not have any budgets. Literally no budget. So the first thing that cleared my head was budgetary constraints. And then you start thinking, how do I get something done in public sector without having any finances? And as an example that I love, because it's an interagency example of innovating within constraints. So it's between the Nigerian Postal Service and the National Agency for the Control of AIDS, which is headed by Dr. Temitope Ilori. So NACA, they do a lot of things, which includes keeping an eye on disease burdens in every single local government across the country. Primarily AIDS, but they do tuberculosis and a lot of other things. Now, they have budgetary constraints because every week they must collect blood samples across Nigeria and test them to know which diseases are where and what is the sort of percentage burden on Nigeria. Now, NIPOS, NIPOS has budgetary constraints as well as underutilization of a lot of our assets in underserved areas. So we came together and said, okay, what if NIPOS within our budget finds a way to create a new product for the healthcare system where we're able to use our logistics networks to help NACA to move their biospecimen across. And then we now have the biospecimen referral network where the healthcare system is using NIPOS to move around blood samples. It's cheaper for them, and the people at NIPOS get to do something. A second example is what my minister is doing with the 3MTT program. He has managed to train tens of thousands of Nigerians without one kobo of the Nigerian government money, meaning that within budgetary constraints, you get to be creative. But in public sector, all this, the technical capacity is not enough. There's something, because you do not work in a vacuum. You work within a political environment. So your purpose needs political alignment. You might not be a politician. Some public sector people are politicians, not all are politicians, but you must be politically aligned. You must understand the vision of whoever you are working with. For me, it is the vision of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, which is the renewed hope agenda, the 8-point agenda to create a new Nigeria. Because if you are not aligned, then you are rowing a boat that is going to be adrift from the administration that you're working on. So whether you're working for an APC administration under a broom, PDP under an umbrella, you need to be aligned. There's this whole thing about this technocrat and politician. The way I look at it, my mandate, the validity of my appointment comes because there was a voter mandate that was given to the president. And so without that politics, I would not have any job. So in whatever I do, my purpose must be aligned to the political vision. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but that's the truth of the matter. You work in a political environment. And so once you're aligned, then you must then deliver, because there's a political mandate that must be either gotten back or kept, right? And here I would like to talk about just myself, just for a little bit. in that, I mentioned at the very beginning that I was very deliberate after listening to those two gentlemen that in whatever I did, there are two things that I wanted to stick to. If I was on the outside of government, I always wanted to be government facing. On the flip side, I wanted to be inside government. So my career trajectory is that I was in Central Bank of Nigeria at the very beginning of fintech policy. So I worked in fintech policy under Deputy Governor Tunde Lemo. And after that, I moved to Lagos State government to work with Governor 𝐓𝐏𝐏𝐿 𝐏𝐿. And there I did investment promotion policy, and then I was moved to environmental policy. After that, I moved to Uber, where I did e-mobility policy. After that, I moved to Binance, where I did cryptocurrency, Web3 policy, technology policy. And what this has allowed me to do is that I am able to, I'm bilingual in that in any room I am in, whether I am government or I'm private sector, I understand the language of the other side of the table. And for me, that has been a great thing. So in NIPOS, when I'm talking to my private sector, people who I want to do business with, I understand I understand their triggers, I understand their needs, and I understand that I cannot be attached to outcomes or processes. What I want is impact. I understand the urgency of private sector actors, and I also understand that careful, deliberate pace of public service and public servants. So I speak both languages, and I'm able to bridge ambition and governance realities. I have always been very clear for me that government is where I wanted to be. And so in all these roles, what I always wanted to do was learn, acquire new skills, and acquire new ways of thinking, knowing that I had a multiplicity of stakeholders, and that at the end of the day, what you are trying to do is play an orchestra. You have ministries, agencies, you have National Assembly, you have many stakeholders who work at different paces, who have different needs, who have different interests. And what you're trying to do is play a symphony of all these people to ensure that what your purpose, the outcome that you want, you get it. And another thing is that one thing I've also learned is that you have to learn to be able to build both vertically and horizontally. Another thing I have learned at NIPOS, because is building trust through transparency. And I'll just use an example of something that happened a few months ago. A gentleman, there was this Twitter storm. Somebody said that at NIPOS he ordered something through our system, and when he got it, that it was not what he ordered. And it became a huge thing. So of course I was quite upset, and I told them to go and investigate it. And I found out that he had actually gotten exactly what he ordered, right? Because I don't know, let me not give specifics. But it taught me two things, right? Even though we were right, because of the perception of our institution, everybody believed it. And secondly, what it also taught me is that, so you can be right and be distrusted, you can inherit a system and still be held responsible for history, again, right? So it's not about the customer, it was a mirror of two things, of citizen frustration and institutional accountability, right? So it's about fixing the present. In fact, in public service, I say you're almost like everlasting or eternal. You're trying to fix the past, you're trying to operationalize the present, and you're trying to forecast the future. I know I'm not, but it's one of those things that you're working three sort of pillars of time at the same time. So, let me see. But at the end of the day, you still have to dream big. You still have to dream big. Okay. So for me, what is my big dream for the Nigerian Postal Service? I want it to be one of the Africa's logistics backbone. And one of the ways, and for me, yes, the dream is big, but the way I do it is one at a time. You can have these big dreams, but it's by, how do I say it? Training one team at a time in NIPOS. There are 10,000 people. It is about digitizing one post office at a time, as in improving one system at a time. And so it brings me back to why I walk this road. In the beginning, I had said that I decided to walk this road of public sector because of two gentlemen and because of Nigeria. I keep on thinking this is a mic. So walking that hard road. So public sector leadership isn't glamorous, I can tell you that. It's a lot of hard work. And you quickly realize, like a story I said, that you hold much less power and you hold less cards than you think you do because of the multiplicity of the stakeholders that you have. So basically, it's a lot of hard days, hard conversations. You get small victories, right? And, there's a lot of criticism. And here I would actually like to talk about how I get the courage to keep on showing up at the office every day, even though sometimes I sit down in the car and breathe heavily before I go into the office because I know the torrent of issues that's going to hit me. And I draw my courage from two people that I'm going to speak about very quickly. From one of the people that I work with very, obviously, very closely, who's my honorable minister, who, we have conversations where we talk about trust, integrity, and why we're doing this. Because all of us have our tough times. I think at the end of last year, we had a dinner with him and all the heads of agencies that he supervises. And, we're just talking about how our first full year had gotten. And, we think we're having issues, but, he also discusses some of the issues that he's having. But I think that, and I think for both of us, another person, the top layer of who we get our courage to show up every day for is the president himself, right? So I sit down at night and I think, this thing is tough. And I think about how, some of the reforms and the things that the president has had to do. So for example, removing energy subsidies, even though for some people it wasn't popular, right? But even through that criticism, because something needed to be done, he did it. And so who am I to now say that I can't do something as simple as fixing a post office in Lagos, right? If somebody can remove energy subsidies that we know we should have removed decades ago, right? Who am I? And I think about now that he has removed those subsidies, we have money to do things like giving students student loans, right? People who can't afford to pay their school fees. I thought you would have clapped for that, actually. Not for me, it's for the president. And also the courage, usually, political appointments, again, are very political. And I look at the courage of someone like the president for appointing me, a young lady, as the first female postmaster general. Most places I go to, and they say the PMG is coming, I would pass and nobody will know I'm the one. I look at the courage. So people like myself, people like my colleague in NCC, Dr. Aminu Maida, people like Uzoma Wagba, who are credit court. The president had courage to appoint us regardless of gender, age, or region. That takes courage. And so that courage that is invested in me, it is where I draw my courage to walk this hard road, because it is not glamorous, it is not easy, but it is fulfilling. That, for me, it is fulfilling. Because you know that if you fix one system, you are fixing, like I fixed a post office in an underserved area. That place, all of a sudden, they don't have to go far for things like their NIN registration. They don't have to go far for things like their BVN registration because they can do it. It saves time, it saves lives, it saves money. So you now realize that simple things that you do, make so much impact. And those are some of the things that keep me going on a day-to-day basis. So I'm almost rounding up. In all the things I've said, right? So this is my invitation to you on this journey, for you to walk along this journey if you so wish to. But the invitation I'm giving to you is to love yourself, right? Not in that shallow sort of self-indulgent way that you want to go for a spa day, you want to take yourself out for dinner or something. But in a, what you want to do is love yourself in a deep and purposeful way that recognizes that you matter, right? That your skills, your convictions, your conscience that were given to you were not by accident. And that when you begin to truly love yourself, your story, your values, your voice, something shifts within you because you start to see the humanity in the next person. You begin to love, you now realize that even your fulfillment is tied to the well-being of the person next to you, it's tied to the well-being of your nation, and even generations unborn. And it is that kind of self-love that becomes service to your community. And it is that kind of self-love that eventually becomes leadership. So I'm not inviting you to public sector, but I'm inviting you to a calling to use your gifts to build a better world wherever you find yourself. and to love yourself enough to give yourself for your nation, or for your community, or for your family. So I'm rounding up now with a simple story. Keep on thinking this is a mic. Of a power of choice. So this story, there's a young boy who, there's an old wise man in his community who has the answers to every question, and it irritates the young boy, youthful exuberance. So he decides that he's going to trip up the old man. So he takes a bird in his hand, and he wants to take it to the old man, to ask the old man a question. And he tells himself that he's going to ask the old man, if the old man says that the bird is alive, right? He will crush the bird in his hand to prove the old man wrong. And if the old man says that the bird is dead, he will release the bird, and the bird will fly away. His whole point is to disprove this old man. So he goes to the old man, and he asks the old man, is this bird dead or alive? And the old man says, the power is yours. You decide whether the bird is dead or alive. And this story, I want you to situate yourself in this story. When I heard the story, I situated it in Nigeria. I know that this is Platform Africa, so wherever you are from, situate it in the context of your country. What do you want to do? What do you want to happen to your country, to your community? It's in your hands. It's in nobody else's hands. Do you want your country to die, or do you want it to live? It's not about proving anybody wrong, because public sector leadership is not about holding on. It is about stepping up in every opportunity that you get. Thank you very much.